Hey crew, it's Pit, and I'm back with some more ancient lore. Today we are going to be diving back into the Kybalion. We are going to be reading chapters 1 and 2, discussing a lot of things along the way. This is a level of responsibility video, and you should definitely check out some of the other things that I've done. I have the Infinite Integrations playlist, which will be linked up here, where you can go through and start with the power of perspective in order to change the way that you look at things and have a path to help you get better in you. A lot of the things that we will discuss here today are contained in here, but the ones that are contained in here was from me. It was not what is contained in here. The things that are contained in the Kybalion, we will be talking about in relation to things that have been directly related to me. So if you're uncomfortable with things being directly related to people, this is not going to be the study for you. This is open for everyone, but it is not for everyone. Not everybody wants the knowledge. Not everybody is comfortable having levels of responsibility. Not everybody is comfortable with the terminology that we will be using. It will not be religious based, but it will be beyond the religion. With all that being said, let's dive in.
Chapter 1 The Hermetic Philosophy.
The lips of wisdom are closed, except to the ears of understanding.
The Kybalion. From old Egypt have come fundamental, esoteric, and occult teachings, which have so strongly influenced the philosophies of all races, nations, and peoples for several thousand years. Egypt, the home of the pyramids and the Sphinx, was the birthplace of the hidden wisdom and mystic teachings. From her secret doctrine all nations have borrowed. India, Persia, Chaldea, Media, China, Japan, Assyria, ancient Greece, and Rome, and other ancient countries partook liberally at the feast of knowledge which the hierophants and masters of the land of Isis so freely provided for those who came prepared to partake of the great store of mystic and occult lore which the masterminds of that ancient land had gathered together. In ancient Egypt dwelt the great adepts and masters who have never been surpassed, and whom seldom have been equaled. During the centuries that have taken their processional flights since the days of great Hermes, in Egypt was located the great Lodge of Lodges of the mystics. At the doors of her temples entered the neophytes who afterwards, as hierophants, adepts, and masters, traveled to the four corners of the earth, carrying with them the precious knowledge which they were ready, anxious, and willing to pass on to those who were ready to receive the same. All students of the occult recognize the debt that they owe to these venerable masters of that ancient land. But among these great masters of ancient Egypt, there once dwelt one of whom the masters hailed as
the Master of Masters.
If man indeed he was, dwelt in Egypt in the earliest days, he was known as Hermes Trismegistus. He was the father of the occult wisdom, the founder of astrology, the discoverer of alchemy. The details of his life story are lost to history, owing to the lapse of the years, though several of the ancient countries disputed with each other in their claims to the honor of having furnished his birthplace, and this thousands of years ago. The date of his sojourn in Egypt, in that his last incarnation on this planet, is not now known, but it has been fixed at the early days of the oldest dynasties of Egypt, long before the days of Moses. The best authorities regard him as a contemporary of Abraham, and some of the Jewish traditions go so far as to claim that Abraham acquired a portion of his mystic knowledge from Hermes himself. As the years rolled by after his passing from this plane of life, tradition recording that he lived 300 years in the flesh, the Egyptians deified Hermes and made him one of their gods under the name Teote. Years after, the people of ancient Greece also made him one of their many gods, calling him Hermes, the god of wisdom. The Egyptians revered his memory for many centuries, yes, tens of centuries, calling him the scribe of the gods and bestowing upon him distinctively his ancient title, Trismegistus, which means the thrice great, the great great, and the greatest great, etc. In all the ancient lands, the name of Hermes Trismegistus was revered, the name being synonymous with the font of wisdom. Even to this day we use the term hermetic in the sense of secret, sealed so that nothing can escape, etc. And this by reason of the fact that the followers of Hermes always observed the principle of secrecy in their teachings. They did not believe in casting pearls before swine, but rather held to the teaching, milk for babes, meat for strong men, both of which maxims are familiar to readers of the Christian scriptures, but both of which has been used by the Egyptians for centuries before the Christian era. And this philosophy of careful dissemination of the truth has always characterized the Hermetics, even unto the present day. The Hermetic teachings are to be found in all lands, among all religions, but never identified with any particular country, nor with any particular religious sect. This because of the warning of the ancient teachers against allowing the secret doctrine to become crystallized into a creed. The wisdom of this caution is apparent to all students of history. The ancient occultism of India and Persia degenerated and was largely lost, owing to the fact that the teachers became priests, and so mixed theology with the philosophy. The result being that the occultism of India and Persia has been gradually lost amidst the mass of religious superstition, cults, creeds, and gods. So it was with the ancient Greece and Rome. So it was with the Hermetic teachings of the Gnostics and early Christians, which were lost at the time of Constantine, whose iron hand smothered philosophy with a blanket of theology, losing to the Christian church that which was its very essence and spirit, causing it to grope throughout several centuries before it found the way back to its ancient faith. The indications apparent to all careful observers in this 20th century being that the church is now struggling to get back to its ancient mystic teachings. But there were always a few faithful souls who kept alive the flame, tending it carefully and not allowing its light to become extinguished. And thanks to these staunch hearts and fearless minds, we have the truth still with us. But it is not found in books to any great extent. It has been passed along from master to student, from initiate to hierophant, from lip to ear. When it was written down at all, its meaning was veiled in terms of alchemy and astrology, so that only those possessing the key could read it aright. This was made necessary in order to avoid the prosecutions of the theologians of the Middle Ages, who fought the secret doctrine with fire and sword, stake, gibbet, and cross. Even to this day, there will be found but few reliable books on the Hermetic philosophy, although there are countless references to it in many books written on various phases of occultism. And yet, the Hermetic philosophy is the only master key which will open all the doors of the occult teachings. In the early days, there was a compilation of certain basic Hermetic doctrines passed on from teacher to teacher, which was known as the Kybalion. The exact significance and meaning of the term having been lost for several centuries. This teaching, however, is known to many, to whom it has descended from mouth to ear, on and on, throughout the centuries. Its precepts have never been written down or printed, so far as we know. It was merely a collection of maxims, axioms, and precepts, which were non-understandable to outsiders, but which were readily understood by students. After the axioms, maxims, and precepts had been explained and exemplified by the Hermetic initiates to their neophytes, these teachings really constituted the basic principles of the art of Hermetic alchemy, which contrary to the general belief, dealt in the mastery of mental forces, rather than the material elements, the transmutation of one kind of mental vibrations into others, instead of changing of one kind of metal into another. The legends of the philosopher's stone, which would turn base metal into gold, was an allegory relating to Hermetic philosophy, readily understood by all students of true Hermeticism. In this little book, of which this is the first lesson, we invite our students to examine into the Hermetic teachings, as set forth in the Kybalion, as explained by ourselves, humble students of the teachings, who, while bearing the title of initiates, are still students at the feet of Hermes, the Master. We, herein, give you many of the maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion, accompanied by explanations and illustrations, which we deem likely to render the teachings more easily comprehended by the modern student, particularly as the original text is purposely veiled in obscure terms. The original maxims, axioms, and precepts of the Kybalion are printed herein in italics, the proper credit being given. Our own work is printed in the regular way in the body of the work. We trust that the many students to whom we now offer this little work will derive as much benefit from the study of its pages as have the many who have gone on before, treading the same path to mastery throughout the centuries that have been passed since the times of Hermes Trismegistus, the master of masters, the great. In the words of the Kybalion,
Where fall the footsteps of the Master, the ears of those ready for his teachings open wide. The Kybalion. When the ears of the student are ready to hear, then cometh the lips to fill them with wisdom. The Kybalion.
so that, according to the teachings, the passage of this book to those ready for the instruction will attract the attention of such as are prepared to receive the teaching. And likewise, when the pupil is ready to receive the truth, then this little book will come to him or her. Such is the law, the Hermetic principle of cause and effect, in its aspect of the law of attraction, will bring lips and ear together, pupil and book in company. So mote it be.
And so we're at the end of chapter 1. And what did we get in chapter 1? We got basically a reiteration of the letter. This is saying that the doors are opening, right? This is saying that we are casting open the doors. We are doing something that has not been done before. Up until this time, this wisdom has been passed on mouth to ear, not broad spectrum in book or broad spectrum across the internet. That has never been a thing. Religious persecution has been a thing ever since people have conceived of deities, right? This transcends almost everyone's concept of a deity. We are going to be getting into what that means here in chapter 2, but God is all things. And since God is all things, the deification that causes the doctrinal problems is not from God. That is the things that men have created around God. And that is what causes the need for secrecy. We are in a time now where that need is not as urgent as it once was, right? Nobody's going to come knocking down your door because you're following the Hermetic principles or the laws of creation, which are not quite the same thing, and we will also be getting into in chapter 2. But nobody's going to come and put you on a stake or burn you on a cross. Those things used to happen. And so secrecy was a needed thing. Now it's not. Now the doors can be open wide. But the thing is, even with wide open doors, almost nobody chooses to walk through. If you are this far along in these videos, you are choosing to walk through. You are accepting responsibility for yourself and those around you. You are embracing
your greater purpose and trying to become the person that you were designed to be, to fulfill the thing that you were put here for. There was something that you were here for and you alone. And you can either choose to embrace that or you can choose to reject that. That is basically the two choices. You get to freely make those. You get to choose. You get to face the consequences. Those are all your things. Once upon a time, those choices were more limited. You could have been seeking and searching and never found because some things were hidden from you. What the initiates were trying to do here, and what I am trying to do as well, is to clarify. There are things that work. There are things that will work, but aren't quite correct. And most, if used correctly and with the correct intentions, and you're aligned with the 8 laws, like most of the things that are wrong are not wrong enough to have eternal type consequences, right? There are things that you can do that can severely affect you on an eternal level, but most of the things you don't. They affect you now. They affect you here. The law of returns is a very real thing. We'll be getting into that. But the doors are now open. The pearls are now cast. What I am doing is polishing the pearls a little bit, right? What the 3 initiates did was cast the pearls. They took the teachings that were once obscure and clarified and threw them out so that people could pick them up. And the work was on you to clarify them. The work was on you to go through and do the things. Well, I am taking part of that load on myself. Part of it is still on you. Most of it is still on you. I am taking and removing a little bit more of the obscuring, right? I'm polishing up the pearls just a little bit, and I'm giving them to you as well. That does not mean that you don't have to make your own jewelry. You don't have to do something with the pearl. You have to internalize it. You have to change. You have to walk the thing. It is up to you. You have the ultimate resource to help you, but you have to be willing to walk where the ultimate resource wants you to walk. Okay, so let's dive into Chapter 2, the 7 Hermetic Principles. Let's go. The principles of truth are 7. He who knows these understandingly possesses the magic key, before whose touch all the doors of the temple fly open. The Kybalion. The 7 Hermetic principles upon which the entire Hermetic philosophy is based are as follows. 1. The Principle of Mentalism. 2. The Principle of Correspondence. 3. The Principle of Vibration. 4. The Principle of Polarity. 5. The Principle of Rhythm. 6. The Principle of Cause and Effect. And 7. The Principle of Gender. Now, I'm going to take a second here, and let me get the correct thing pulled up. And we're going to talk about the 8 laws of creation real quick, because they are close, but they are not quite the same thing. And that is significant. The 7 Hermetic principles are all contained within the 8 laws of creation. But by themselves, the 7 Hermetic principles are not enough. They are not the full harmonic of how creation actually works. A couple of the Hermetic principles are, like 2 of them are one of the laws. And so some of these things, as we talk about, we will go through and talk about. I'm going to come back and we will talk about the laws of creation on the backside briefly. I have an entire video dedicated to them if you are interested in a longer description right now. But we will go through and hit what each of these mean in a very real way on the backside of reading these. But for now, you have the law of the one, the law of the momentum, the law of response, the law of returns, the law of attraction, the law of genders, the law of rhythm, and the law of purpose. Okay, so now back to the Hermetic principles. The principles of truth. Okay, we did that part. The 7 principles will be discussed and explained as we proceed with these lessons. A short explanation of each, however, may as well be given at this point. The principle of mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that all is mind.
It explains that the all, which is the substantial reality underlying all the outward manifestations and appearances which we know under the terms of the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, energy, and in short, all that is apparent to our material senses, is spirit, which in itself is unknowable and undefinable, but which may be considered the thought of as an universal, infinite, living mind. It also explains that all the phenomena in the world or universe is simply a mental creation of the all, subject to the law of created things, and that the universe as a whole and in its parts or units has the existence in the mind of the all, in which mind we live and move and have our being. This principle, by establishing the mental nature of the universe, easily explains all of the varied mental and psychic phenomena that occupy such a large portion of the public attention, and which, without much explanation, are non-understandable and defy scientific treatment. An understanding of this great Hermetic principle of mentalism enables the individual to readily grasp the laws of the mental universe and to apply the same to his well-being and advancement. The Hermetic student
is enabled to apply intelligently the great mental laws instead of using them in a haphazard manner. The Hermetic student is enabled, with the master key in his possession, the student may unlock the many doors of the mental and psychic temple of knowledge and enter the same freely and intelligently. This principle explains the true nature of energy, power, and matter, and why and how all of those are subordinate to the mastery of mind. One of the old Hermetic masters wrote long ages ago,
"He who grasps the truth of the mental nature of the universe is well advanced on the path to mastery."
and these words are as true today as at the time they were first written. Without this master key, mastery is impossible, and the student knocks in vain at the many doors of the temple.
Okay, I am going to talk about this real quick. Let me go ahead and set this up. So this ties into the law of the one. The law of the one is that God is. God is all. God is one. God is everything. God is me. God is you. God is the space between me and you, and God is the space between me and you. He is everything that you can put your hands on and everything that you can't. That is, in sum, this whole thing, right? This is the number one fundamental law of creation, spoken in a different way, but the same way. The doctrines of man, what religion you place upon God, makes no difference. That becomes the measuring rod by which you are measured. That becomes the cup by which you are judged. That becomes your reality. The reality that is that God is. God is all things, and He has placed you here for a purpose, and within that purpose, all things are available to you. It is when we get outside of that purpose that we start feeling the benefit or reaping the rewards that are not so judiciously wanted, right? That's not what we want to happen. But if we are operating within the will of the one, we get the rewards that the one has intended for us, because they were our intended reward from the beginning. That path is the one that, if we choose to submit ourselves to, leads to the best result. All the other paths, the paths of resistance, are still available to you, but they lead in the wrong direction. That is the law of the one. Okay, now back to, I said go. Okay. The principle of correspondence. As above, so below. As below, so above. The Kybalion.
This principle embodies the truth that there is always a correspondence between the laws and phenomena of the various planes of being and life. The old Hermetic axiom ran into these words: as above, so below. As below, so above. And the grasping of this principle gives one the meaning of solving many a dark paradox, and the hidden secret of nature. There are planes beyond our knowing, but when we apply the principle of correspondence to them, we are able to understand much that would be otherwise unknowable to us. This principle of a universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe is a universal law. The ancient Hermetists considered this principle as one of the most important mental instruments by which man was able to pry aside the obstacles which hid from view the unknown. Its use even tore aside the veil of Isis to the extent that a glimpse of the face of the goddess might be caught. Just as a knowledge of the principles of geometry enables a man to measure distant suns and their movements while seated in his observatory, so a knowledge of the principle of correspondence enables a man to reason intelligently from the known to the unknown. Studying the monad, he understands the archangel.
The monad being that all things are one. All right. That is a very, very, very much a simplification, and I understand that, but that is basically what it says. The law of correspondence here kind of ties into a couple of the different laws. Like, we're going to review the laws on the other side of it, but it ties into a couple of different ones, right? That it goes into the law of returns somewhat. It goes into the law of attraction somewhat. It goes into the law of rhythm somewhat. This is a way of, this might be where they're missing the one part of the octave, right? There has to be 8. 8 is the start of the new. It has to be included in the harmonic. It has to be. And so there should be 8. And so, yeah. But this is giving you something here, right? There are definitely nuggets in here, right? So, as above, so below. The principle of universal application and manifestation on the various planes of the material, mental, and spiritual universe is the Trinity, right? This body, mind, and soul, or body, soul, and spirit, right? So that is how the things work, the correspondence works, and so there is some things there. I am not one who is a heavy proponent of physical rituals or things of that nature. And some people take the correspondence principle to be voodoo dolls. That's one way of looking at it, right? That is not trying to pin that on everybody or anything like that, but that is one way of looking about it. If I make this doll of this person and it will correspond, that is one of the ways that the principle of correspondence is put about. There are other ways that are involving the heavens and the horoscopes. Those all of that is nonsense to me, right? But it can be effective because mentality is a very real thing. And so your energetic investment into things can affect the very physical world. But it's mostly due to the next one, and like the principle of correspondence is more like a box to put the action in, right? We talked about boxes in a separate place in the playlist, but it's more like the box than it is the actual energetic investment. It's like the box that you're putting it in is the principle of correspondence. So if you're holding that this is true, it becomes the true. So as above, so below. Now, as above, so below shows you the inner workings of the cosmos. Do not get that twisted, right? That part of the saying is definitely talking about things, because if you look at our solar system, for instance, it mimics the movements and motions of how we perceive the atomic structure to be, right? So, for instance, helium has 1, 1, and 1. That is nucleus, electron, and a proton, right? And then you have the 2 in the middle, and then you have the part that goes around it. Well, the density of the one in the middle increases, the number in the outside increases as well, and it becomes orbits, and it looks like the solar system. Now, the orbits in the solar system are not a flat disk. There are variations both up and down in the cosmic focus, I guess. Our perspective is a little bit wonky because actually looking forward for us, like you would think that me looking at this camera is looking forward, but it's not. Looking forward in a cosmic perspective is this: if you lie on your back at about an hour or two before dawn, right when the sun is just visible on the eastern horizon, right? And if you lay flat on your back with your feet to the south, you are facing forward. All right, so the principle of vibration. Let's dive into this before I completely lose my voice. Nothing rests, everything moves, everything vibrates. The Kybalion.
This principle embodies the truth that everything is in motion, everything vibrates, and nothing is at rest. Facts that modern science endorses, and which each new scientific discovery tends to verify. And yet, this Hermetic principle was enunciated thousands of years ago by the masters of ancient Egypt. This principle explains that the differences between different manifestations of matter, energy, mind, and even spirit result largely from varying rates of vibration, from the all, which is pure spirit, down to the grossest form of matter. All is in vibration. The higher the vibration, the higher the position on the scale. The vibration of spirit is at such an infinite rate of intensity and rapidity that it is practically at rest. Just as rapidly moving wheel seems to be motionless. And at the other end of the scale there are gross forms of matter whose vibrations are so low as to seem at rest. Between these poles there are millions upon millions of varying degrees of vibration, from corpuscle and electron, atom and molecule, to worlds and universes. Everything is in vibratory motion. This is also true on the planes of energy and force, which are but varying degrees of vibration, and also on the mental planes, whose states depend upon vibrations, and even on the spiritual planes. An understanding of this principle with the appropriate formulas enables Hermetic students to control their own mental vibrations as well as those of others. This matters. The masters also apply this principle to the conquering of natural phenomena in various ways. He who understands the principle of vibration has grasped the scepter of power, says one of the old writers. And here lies a level of responsibility.
If you are unsure of what a level of responsibility is, it means that you will be responsible for the use of the knowledge that you obtain from that point forward. If you are uncomfortable with that, what that might represent, this is going to be a good place to click out. Okay, so this principle is part of the law of one. All things are God. God is all things, right? This tells you in here, this is from the all. This is part of the principle of the one, or the law of the one. This is everything is God. Everything moves. Everything is a harmonic. Everything is a harmonic. Our planets are held in place by the harmonic of our particular solar system, which is held in place in the galaxy at large, which is held in place in the universe at large, which is to say that it is all moving through space. When you are standing at your absolute stillness, you are moving at millions of miles in relative to something far out in space. Our entire solar system moves. It moves up and down. It moves back and forth. It has its own particular harmony that it rides an electromagnetic spectrum. That it is the thoughts of God. And so, everything is indeed moving. Anything that you consider solid is not. You are not solid. You seem to be. You can't push inside of your hand, can you? You're like, but you can take a knife and you can cut it open and you can get in there. Things start moving on its own then, right? But this wall is not solid. It just appears to be solid to my perception. There is something that could pass through this wall, right? Probably not a photon, but some type of an electron can pass through that. Well, X-rays can definitely pass through some plaster, right? In a close range with a high dose. But there are other particles that can pass through it too. If it was solid, they couldn't do that. The individual molecules contained within this are moving. All of that is energy. Energy can be manipulated. You can manipulate energy. If you take magnets and you hold them close together and they're aligned correctly, they want to snap together, right? But if you flip one of them, they want to push apart. That is energy in motion. You can feel that. If you take those and you put them where they push apart and you try to put them together and you get them right at the point of resistance, you can feel in your fingertips the energy transfer happening between those two as they repulse. It will take you some time to do that. You will not get it right off the bat. You will absolutely think I am crazy for a while, but thinking I am crazy does not change anything I say. And so, you can manipulate the energy within your own body. If you don't believe that, here is a quick example of how you can do it.
I want you to talk as low as you can.
Right?
Your focus changed.
Your normal tone of voice is...
Mine is right here. I can take it down, but I'm in vocal therapy, so I'm having trouble with my voice. I can't maintain the same tone all the time.
So I've gotten used to talking up here. Now take your tone up as high as you can, right? You had to focus on that. You changed where you project your voice from. You changed it from slightly down here when you got vocal and deep. And you got slightly up here is where you changed your focus. That is how you pull energy. That is how you move energy through the rest of your body. But the scope changes. You are changing the volume and fluctuation of your voice by changing your attention inside of the box of your throat chakra, right? You're going from the low end to the high end. This is you manipulating the energy within that one particular chakra. There are 7 of them, right? 7 major ones. There are possibilities of others that go through your arms and out your fingers and through your feet, right? But the 7 major ones begin at the base, the sacral, the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, third eye, and the divine. And there's one more because there has to be 8. It is divine. It extends from you. You only have access to it if you are properly aligned through the 7 other ones. It's part of the way the mechanism works to keep you from hurting yourself. But that one is where the manifestation takes place. I have a video on manifestation. You put things inside the box, inside the divine aura, right? Between your aura for your individual self and the divine one, which gives you access to the outside. That is where the manifestation happens. That is the spirit, right? Your flesh is you. Your soul rides in there and makes the decisions. The spirit is the outside. It is the blood flowing through you. It is the breath in your lungs, and you can control these things. Not to the greatest extent, unless you want to not be here anymore, but you can change your blood pressure. You can change your breathing rate. You can change your heart rate. You can do all of these things through exercise or through the force of will. Both are possible. You can awaken, strengthen, flex, and exercise all 7 of your main chakras as well as your divine chakra. You can flex these physically. If you squeeze your butthole, you're doing the base, right? If you tighten your belly like you're going to do a crunch, you're doing your solar plexus, right? You can flex these and cleanse them and direct the energy that you already contain from the change in the spirit that you are enveloped in. You can draw on that energy. It is a possibility. It rests within the principle of vibration, which is part of the law of the one. Because you are part of the one, you have access to creation. That is something that was given to you. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is not something to hide, but it is not something to just jump into willy-nilly. There are 8 laws of creation, and you should follow all 8 of the laws of creation. And so, let's get into the next part. The principle of polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has poles. Everything has a pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Extremes meet. All truths are but half-truths, and all paradoxes may be reconciled.
The Kybalion. This principle embodies the truth that everything is dual, and everything has two poles. Everything has its pair of opposites, all of which were old Hermetic axioms. It explains the old paradoxes that have perplexed so many, which have been stated as follows. Thesis and antithesis are identical in nature, but different in degree. Opposites are the same, differing only in degree. The pairs of opposites may be reconciled. Extremes meet. Everything is and isn't at the same time.
All truths are but half-truths, and every truth is half-false. There are two sides to everything, etc., etc., etc.
It explains that in everything there are two poles or opposite aspects, and that opposites are really only the two extremes of the same thing, with many varying degrees between them. To illustrate, heat and cold, although opposites, are really the same thing, the difference consisting merely of degrees of the same thing. Look at your thermometer and see if you can discover where heat terminates and cold begins. There is no such thing as absolute heat or absolute cold. The two terms, heat and cold, simply indicate varying degrees of the same thing, and that same thing which manifests as heat and cold is merely a form, variety, and rate of vibration. So, heat and cold are simply the two poles of that which we call heat, and the phenomena attended thereupon are manifestations of the principle of polarity. The same principle manifests in the case of light and darkness, which are the same thing, the difference consisting of varying degrees between the two poles of the phenomena. Where does darkness leave off and light begin? What is the difference between large and small, between hard and soft, between black and white, between sharp and dull, between noise and quiet, between high and low, between positive and negative? The principle of polarity explains these paradoxes, and no other principle can supersede it. The same principle operates on the mental plane. Let us take a radical and extreme example of love and hate. Two mental states are apparently totally different, and yet there are degrees of hate and degrees of love, and a middle point in which we use the terms like and dislike, which shade into each other so gradually that sometimes we are at a loss to know whether we like or dislike, or neither. And all are simply degrees of the same thing, as you will see if you but think a moment. And more of this, and considered of more important by Hermeticists, it is possible to change the vibrations of hate to the vibrations of love in one's own mind and in the mind of others. Many of you who read these lines have had personal experiences of the involuntary, rapid transition from love to hate, and the reverse in your own case and that of others, and you will therefore realize the possibility of this being accomplished by the use of the will, by means of the Hermetic formulas. Good and evil are but the poles of the same thing, and the Hermeticist understands the art of transmuting evil into good, by means of an application of the principle of polarity. In short, the art of polarization becomes a phase of mental alchemy known and practiced by the ancient and modern Hermetic masters. An understanding of the principle will enable one to change his own polarity as well as that of others, if he will devote time and study necessary to master the art. Okay, so what we have here, the principle of polarity is actually part of the law of returns and part of the law of genders. There may be some law of rhythm in there, but almost all of this is actually contained in other things, right? Honestly, it could be broken down into the law of the one, again, because all things are, right? There is a difference between absolute good and absolute evil. They are both real things. They are both real choices, but they are the same choice, right? You can choose, right? The spiral of choice allows you personally to choose either to rise or to not, to go down, right? You get the choice.
whether you want to align with creation and the good or with destruction and the not good. You get that choice. But it is contained within the one because both of the choices are within the will of the one. Both of the choices will lead to different places, right? They will go on diverging paths, but both of those paths have been accounted for by the one, and therefore, whichever path you choose, there is another path waiting. That takes up most of this. This is a relativism talk. It is more of an explanation for people who don't understand the concept that there is no adding cold, right? You can only remove heat. That is a very real thing. That is one of the laws of thermodynamics. You cannot add cold. You can only remove heat. But both heat and cold are relative terms. If you are comfortable, anything warmer than that is hot, and anything colder than that is cold. Or if you have a specific temperature, anything warmer than that is hot, and anything colder than that is cold. It is a relative term to describe the actual action of a thing. Well, the thing is heat. Right? You either have heat or you don't have heat. You don't ever have cold. And so everything in this is contained in the law of the one. But there is a little bit of the law of rhythms in here and the law of returns. That's why the laws are, in my opinion, a little bit more important than the principles. But the principles can get you to the laws. Okay, so we are going to dive into next is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out and in. Everything has its tides, and all things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything, and the measure of the swing to the right is the measure of the swing to the left. Rhythm compensates. The Kybalion.
This principle embodies the truth that in everything there is manifested a measured motion to and fro, a flow and inflow, a swing backwards and forward, a pendulum-like movement, a tide like ebb and flow, a high tide and low tide, between the two poles which exist in accordance with the principle of polarity described a moment ago. There is always an action and a reaction, an advance and a retreat, a rising and a sinking. This is in the affairs of the universe, suns, worlds, men, animals, minds, energy, and matter. This law is manifest in the creation and destruction of worlds, in the rise and fall of nations, in the life of all things, and finally in the mental states of man. It is with this latter that the Hermeticists find the understanding of the principle most important. The Hermetists have grasped this principle. Finding its universal application, they have also discovered certain means to overcome its effects in themselves by the use of appropriate formulas and methods. They apply the mental law of neutralization. They cannot annul the principle or cause it to cease its operation, but they have learned how to escape its effects upon themselves to a certain degree, depending upon the mastery of the principle. They have learned how to use it instead of being used by it. In this and similar methods consists the art of the Hermeticists. The master of the Hermetics polarizes himself at the point at which he desires to rest, and then neutralizes the rhythmic swing of the pendulum, which would tend to carry him to the other pole. All individuals who have attained any degree of self-mastery do this to a certain degree, more or less consciously, less unconsciously. But the master does this consciously and by the use of his will, and attains a degree of poise and mental firmness almost impossible of belief on the part of the masses, who are swung backwards and forwards like a pendulum. The principle and that of polarity have been closely studied by the Hermetists, and the methods of counteracting, neutralizing, and using them form an important part of the Hermetic mental alchemy. And again, this is the law of rhythm, but the way I do the law of rhythm is a little bit different, right? Everything goes out, everything comes in. That is true. The pendulum swings both left and right. That is true. The returns are governed by other laws. Like, I know that sounds a little bit weird to say, but the things that happen when the pendulum returns is different from the fact that the pendulum will return.
And so the movement will happen no matter where you ground yourself, but you don't get as swayed by it. Right? What this means in this is that when the current tides of the factions fighting currently, like take our political system, right and left, right, whichever side you happen to fall on, I am not getting into that today. There is a great deal of emotional sway held by each of those particular parties, and they use that sometimes to the benefit of their party, but mostly to the detriment of the other people, right? And so the hyperbole of one becomes the anti-hyperbole of another, which leads to its own set of hyperbole. That is the return of the pendulum. It goes left, it goes right, it goes left, it goes right. History is this pendulum. If you take the time to look, you can see it happening currently as it happened previously. The pendulum swung far to the left and it was about to swing to the right. Things are different. The response and the situations of what happened during that are different. When it swings one way, some things happen and it gets a little bit wild. But when it swings the other way, other things happen and it gets a little bit wild in a completely different way. All of this is contained within the law of rhythms and within the law of response, right? The law of response governs the thing that happens, whereas the law of the rhythm is that it will happen. Which leads us into the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, and every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. Chance is but a name for law not recognized. There are many planes of causation, but nothing escapes the law. The Kybalion.
The principle embodies the fact that there is a cause for every effect, an effect from every cause. It explains that everything happens according to law, and nothing ever merely happens. There is no such thing as chance, while that there are various planes of cause and effect, the higher dominating the lower planes. Still, nothing ever entirely escapes the law. The Hermetists understand the art and method of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect, to a certain degree, and by mentally rising to a higher plane they become causers instead of effects. The masses of people are carried along, obedient to environment, the wills and desires of others stronger than themselves, heredity, suggestion, and other outward causes moving them about like pawns on the chessboard of life. But the masters, rising to the plane above, dominate their moods, characters, qualities, and powers, as well as the environment surrounding them, and become movers instead of pawns. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by the wills of others' wills and environment. They use the principle instead of being its tools. The masters obey the causation of the higher planes, but they help to rule their own plane. In this statement there is condensed a wealth of Hermetic knowledge. Let him read who can.
And so, again, we have this is the principle of cause and effect, but it is the law of response, and it is also the law of returns and the law of rhythm, right? So the things that are being outlined here are effective things. You can take these and implement them, but they're not going to get you exactly where you want to go. They're going to get you close. They're going to get you started, and there are things to discover always for yourself, but there are key pieces missing because we're about to wrap this one up and we have not hit all of the laws. All right, so the principle of gender. Gender is in the everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. Gender manifests on all planes. The Kybalion.
This principle embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, the masculine and feminine principles ever at work. This is true not only of the physical plane, but of the mental and even the spiritual planes. On the physical plane, the principle manifests as sex. On the higher planes, it takes higher forms, but the principle is ever the same. No creation, physical, mental, or spiritual, is possible without this principle. An understanding of its laws will throw light on many a subject that has perplexed the minds of men. The principle of gender works ever in the direction of the generation, regeneration, and creation. Everything and every person contains the two elements or principles, or this great principle within it, him or her. Every male thing has the female element also. Every female contains also the male principle. If you would understand
the philosophy of mental and spiritual creation, regeneration, and regeneration, you must understand and study this Hermetic principle. It contains the solution of many mysteries of life. We caution you that this principle has no reference to the many base, pernicious, and degrading lustful theories, teaches, and practices, which are taught under fanciful titles, and which are a prostitution of the great natural principle of gender. Such base revivals of the ancient infamous forms of phallicism tend to ruin mind, body, and soul. And the Hermetic philosophy has ever sounded the warning note against these degraded teachings which tend towards lust, licentiousness, and perversion of nature's principles. If you seek such teachings, you must go elsewhere for them. Hermeticism contains nothing for you along those lines. To the pure, all things are pure, and to the base, all things are base. And again, this one is a law, right? There is indeed the law of genders. Everything does indeed contain both masculine and feminine energy. Masculine energy is the destructive part, it is the renewal part, it is the protective part. Feminine energy is the creative part, it is the nurturative part, it is the preparedness part, right? Men in broad general scope, are about the protection and hunting and provision, whereas women are for the care and the nurturing and the home. That is broad, that is general, that is evolutionary. If you have a problem with that, you're in the wrong place. I'm not putting you in a box. These are evolutionary things. Men are stronger. Women are better at nurture. That is just part of nature. But everybody contains both. If you do not contain nurture and you're a man, then you are not in balance and you are not healthy. Life is about the balance of all of the vices, not just sex, but sex is a major one, right? You have lust. Lust is a major thing that we are here to overcome, but so is chastity. You are not meant to be chaste and you are not meant to be lustful. You are meant to find the balance between the two. Men are lustful and women tend more towards the chaste side. Again, broad generalizations, masculine and feminine energy. Find the balance within. That is true for all 7 of the vices. There are 7 vices because the beginning of the next harmonic doesn't particularly apply. It begins anew, right? It's the E string to the E string. This is teaching you the law of genders, in a way. I teach it a little bit differently, right? Let's go ahead and we will pull up mine one more time. And so we have. These are, I call them mine, but they're not mine. They were just revealed to me. They were something that I was told to write down and to investigate to make sure that I was saying the right things before I said anything. And it is indeed. These are not in any particular order except that the one is in the beginning, right? And so the law of the one is that all mass is energy stored and can neither be created nor destroyed. All things are God, and therefore you cannot destroy it. You can transform it. You can change energy from one form to the other, but you cannot create nor destroy energy nor mass. Mass is simply energy that is no longer moving. That is the law of one. The law of momentum. An object will remain constant unless it is acted upon with sufficient force, right? That doesn't mean, it means that you need to take care in the force that you use. If you use extra force, there will be extra consequences. And if you do not use sufficient force, the consequences will not be enough. But you need to take the care and the understanding to find the proper level of force to use before you apply any force. That is the law of momentum. The object will remain constant unless it is acted upon with sufficient force, and then that force will be returned. Which goes into the law of response. The law of response, that is the wrong thing. Why is that there? The law of response says that every action creates a proportional response, not necessarily an equal and opposite one, not necessarily how Newtonian physics works, right? I'm not denying that things happen according to Newtonian physics. This is a fundamental law of creation, however, and it has slightly different ramifications. Every action creates a proportional response, and that proportion is guided by something else, but it breaks down to where you are in your particular lesson. If you are getting this particular lesson the first time, it is going to be fairly light consequences. But the next time that you get the lesson, the consequences will be more severe. And so it begins and continues until you reach the point in which it is negative returns. Which brings us into the law of returns, which says that effort expended returns at a higher rate until peak, which is the squared cube law, right? For every gain in size, there has to be an equal gain in mass. Every doubling requires 3 times the mass to make. And so, for you to enact the correct amount of force, you need to pay attention to the law of returns. Effort expended returns at a higher rate until maximum is achieved, at which point it turns into negative returns, right? So it's like a curve. Imagine that. The first time you expend the effort, you get basically a doubling of return. The second time that you expend the effort, it is more like 4 times, right? And then the next time it is more like 8 times. It is an exponential thing until it gets to the point where you are choosing to invest the energy wrong. You have received such negative returns that you are instead choosing the wrong thing. It's because you have been choosing the wrong thing the whole time. And you keep expending more effort into the wrong. So the effort comes back wrong. Part of this is that will change, right? The toroid will happen, the return will come. And because the return will come, you will be given another opportunity to get the light consequences of the actions. That is part of the choice pattern. If you choose at the point of apex to continue on the path, the negative returns will be exponentially different. It will get worse in a very real way. That is the law of returns. The law of attraction says that functions of a similar type tend to cluster. That means that you will attract the things which you focus upon. It is the law of magnetism, kind of, sort of, maybe like, but not really. Right? It is the law of attraction. It is, hey, I want this thing. I am going to focus on this thing with a laser efficiency. I'm going to invest my energy directly into the manifestation of. I'm going to create the box and put my energy into the box after making sure that I am fully aligned with all 8 laws of creation, and then the box becomes my reality. That is the law of attraction. It works, positive or negative. It is a fundamental law. So if you are focusing on the negative, guess what's in your box? You don't have to consciously fill the box. The box will be filled by what you're thinking about. If you are not properly aligned in your stack from the bottom to the top and manifesting intentionally, you're going to be manifesting unintentionally. And these laws still apply, whether you are aware of them or not. And so if you are not doing the correct thing, then you're doing the wrong thing. And so the results are going to be the wrong ones. Align yourself. That doesn't mean you have to quit drinking, right? This isn't that type of a situation. Drinking and not drinking is a personal choice for you and your health. It has to do with your spiritual health, absolutely. In some cases, not in all of them. There's nothing wrong inherently with alcohol. It is with your use of it. The same is true with a myriad of other things, including sex or thieving. Next up, the law of genders. This one tends to step on some toes, but it is true, right? Everything in the universe contains both male and female energy. It is entirely okay to be a feminine man. That is how your particular energy choices played out. That is what you chose when you came here. That is your particular set of challenges. It is not okay to say that you have to change anything because you feel like you were in the wrong place, in the wrong way. That is not true. You are meant to be where you are, in the body that you are, but that does not mean that you have to conform to societal norms. You are free to express yourself, right? The things that we as a society have agreed upon are not necessarily laws that you have to strictly adhere to, especially in the modern day and age. That does not mean that you need an entire month dedicated to it. You are perfectly free to be free. There is no need to get into pride. That is out of balance with one of the many sins, right? The sins are the out of balance for either the virtues or the vices. That is a sin either way. And so debauchery is the sin. Embracing your inherent nature is not. If you were born whatever way you were born and you embrace that and you do the things in the correct manner without all the debauchery, you're fine. God made you like that, and nobody, even if they tell you different, it doesn't make a difference. They're not your judge. He is. God created you. He created you exactly as you are, and you are to embrace, right? That doesn't mean that if you were a man, you should be walking around in a way that you were not created. You should not be embracing feminist energy to the point that you're carrying a purse and wearing a skirt if that's not how you were inherently made. But you should be inherent enough in yourself, in your masculinity, to be able to be vulnerable when vulnerability is safe. When you're at home, in your room, you can cry. And it is not a shameful thing to do. You can be afraid. You can be anxious. These things are part of you. Everything is a balance. You are not to let them override you. You are to find the balance in who you are. There is masculine and feminine energy in everything, and there's a broad spectrum between the ultra male and the ultra female. There is a broad spectrum. But you are created the way you are created for a reason, with your own unique challenges, and you are to embrace and balance them, not to go overboard. The law of rhythm. Every force is toroidal. As the pendulum swings, so it must return. Which is a little bit counterintuitive, right? Toroidal, I have so much trouble with that word, is like a donut, right? You see an image of electromagnetism shows the fields, the bands going out. Our Earth is protected by these bands, right? That is the toroid of creation. There are many toroids. When you speak, your mouth creates a toroid around you. The air goes out in a way that it encapsulates you, even if you're not aware of that. Not in a, oh my God, it's going to push me forward type of way, but it goes out and it expands and then it envelops you. It is a real thing. The toroid of creation is part of the swing of balance because toroids move in all directions at the same time. They move both north and south and both east and west. It is a continuous feed in all directions. The balance is the pendulum, right? The pendulum is part of the law of rhythm. It follows where the toroid is going. So if you're speaking a high toroid, it goes this way. And if you're speaking a low toroid, it goes this way. But it must return at some point. And if you are speaking only high and you're not focusing at all on your shadow work, then the return to the shadow is going to be catastrophic. If you are doing your shadow work while you're in the light, then it's not going to be as bad. That is part of the law of rhythm, right? The rhythm is that it will return, that it absolutely will come back at some point. The degree is governed by other things. That's what we were talking about earlier. And then finally, the law of purpose. Everything has a purpose, even misalignment. If you choose, right, hold on.
Life is a choice. Every single day you are faced with hundreds of choices, whether you are conscious of them or not. Right? Do I eat this or do I eat that? Do I go to work or do I stay at home? Do I date this person? Do I marry this person? All of these things are choices that you are continuously making throughout your life. And every one of those choices has an answer. Yes and no. And for every single answer, there is a path that goes off to the yes and a path that goes off to the no. And if you choose yes, you walk the path that goes to yes. And if you choose no, there you walk the path that goes to no. And that path has more choices. Sometimes those choices lead you back to the same place you would have got if you were making the opposite choice. But most often it completely diverges. You get something completely different from an innocuous choice. You chose to go to McDonald's instead of Burger King, and an event happened at McDonald's that changed your life forever. These are parts of the law of purpose. Every choice has a purpose, whether you realize it or not, and God's intention for that purpose. When I say God, I mean the one, the all, the creator, who you is, not any particular doctrine, but he has a purpose for you. I don't know what it is. I am only just beginning to discover my own purpose. But everybody has a purpose. There is something that only you can accomplish, and that point will be brought to you one way or another. Those choices will lead back to that point. It's a bottleneck. But the other parts are largely up to you. They are largely up to what you want to do in your life. And God will use those as well to try to do the best for you. If you are in addiction, he will bring someone to you to offer you the way out. If you are in depression, he will do the same thing. If you are getting a little bit too heady in success, you will be brought an opportunity to be humbled before you are humbled. That is the law of purpose. The purpose is our purpose here on life. The entirety of life's purpose is to make the correct choice. There is a spiral of choice, and the spiral of choice I talk about often, and it is my own concept. Somebody may have come up with it somewhere else, and I may have even heard it and not realized it, but as far as I know, it is mine, right? Imagine there's a screw. It's a giant screw. It is so big that you can walk the treads. And you start life right dead in the middle of that screw. And you can choose to walk up the spiral of choice to the top. Or you can choose to walk down the spiral of choice to the bottom. That is entirely up to you. You get the freedom to choose that. If you are walking up, there will be challenges that are placed specifically to cause you to turn around and go back down. And if you are walking down, there will be challenges placed specifically to cause you to turn around and go back up. Because life is about the balance. You are not meant to be entirely at the top nor entirely at the bottom. But you are meant to choose almost entirely the top. The choices bring you back down, right? The path itself should come down, not you intentionally choosing it, right? You shouldn't be choosing, well, I'm going to go try temptation with addiction today. That should never be a thing. But there will be something placed in your path if you're recovering from addiction that will cause you to think about going back. There will be an obstacle placed in your way to make you decide whether you really want it or whether you don't. That, in sum, is the point of life. The law of purpose ensures that the choices are there to lead to your betterment. Now, your decision from them choices won't, right? If you're brought the choice to not do a thing, and that would lead to your betterment, to not do this thing, but you really want to do it and you choose it, you're making the choice to not do the better thing, right? And you have the freedom to do that, and so you're walking down the spiral. There will come another choice that gives you the opportunity to again not do that thing. Sometimes walking down the spiral can appear to be walking up the spiral. If you are getting heady and haughty and you're proud of your accomplishments and so sure of yourself, you're probably starting to walk down the path and not even realize it. You're thinking everything's going good. I've got financial rewards. Financial rewards are not the best rewards. This is merely grazing the surface of all of these concepts. This is merely a doorway, right? This is me polishing a little bit on the pearls. This is me adding a little bit to the necklace. The Hermetic principles have helped many, many people. I don't take away from that. I don't take away from the many other systems that have as well. Most of them are based, in part at least, apparently, upon the Hermetic principles. So this is not some new thing that just popped up and right, this has been around, but it has been secret. It is time to bring secret things to light because we are getting really close to a bottleneck. There is one coming for all of humanity. It is a predictable, plannable thing. Most people will not make it. I might not make it, and if I don't make it, maybe you will, and maybe me helping you to get better will help humanity on the other side. Maybe my purpose is for you to see this series in particular so that you can be the effective change on the other side of the bottleneck that is coming. Or maybe it's so that you can be the change that needs in your neighborhood right now. Whatever the purpose is, I am here for it. I am trying to walk my greater purpose. I am trying to embrace the responsibility. And so, hopefully I don't bring too much confusion to a somewhat difficult topic. That is where we're going to wrap this one up today. If you like what I'm doing, let me know down below. Hit me with a like, share, and sub. Throw me a comment. If you really like it, hit me with the super thanks. It will be greatly appreciated. If you have questions, anything like that, definitely let me know. To the crew, thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you are here with me, and I am praying for you every single day. Until next time, I love you. God loves you. You are perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are. And this has been Fit Steak. Peace.